All right, Aaron, aka the captain here. I have an individual from Athlete Blood Test. She is Dr. Ańna. A little bit of detail over what Athlete Blood Test does, and then I'm just going to have her lead it right into a little bit about her so we can kind of dive on in. So, Dr. Ańna, let's hear about ABT.
Well, thanks so much for having me on the show, Aaron. I appreciate it. So I absolutely love Athlete Blood Test. I have not been with the company since it started. I kind of stumbled upon it and have just absolutely fallen in love with it since, because Athlete Blood Test is a very kind of organic company, if you will. So it started off when a group of professional triathletes were training for an Ironman, and they were curious how their training affected their blood levels. And so Dr. Garrett Rock started collecting blood samples and was doing analyses to look at how their performance correlated with their biomarkers, and from there was able to essentially establish these ideal ranges based on 10 years of data. So we're sitting on 10 years worth of data in order to kind of create the panels that we have. So it's really fun to see kind of something grow organically into a service or a product that fills a need, instead of a lot of companies that are kind of like, well, how do I just make money? So it's really fun to see the passion behind it and how that's evolved into ABT. So it's a smaller kind of boutique company, if you will, and I really appreciate that aspect because it allows us to be very hands-on with our athletes and with our customers. So some of the larger corporations, if you get your blood test, they'll run it through a computer algorithm. It'll spit out the report and send it to you. So it's just generated. Whereas with all of our reports, we have our analyses, but then we have an expert go through them in terms of looking to make sure that things are appropriate, typing up comments and really kind of hands-on the data and looking at your biomarkers. So it's not just kind of a cookie cutter report, that we've essentially analyzed it and given it to you as if you were coming into our office to work with us.
That's awesome. And that was one of the things that really brought me to you guys initially was you had that information, as you said, 10 years of information. And when you go into your doctor's office, and I know we'll talk about this a little bit later, but when you go into your doctor's office, you really are a cookie cutter. You're looking, or they get your numbers and compare them to other individuals just in our population. And we come across a lot of individuals on a day-to-day basis that, we don't necessarily, as athletes, we don't necessarily mimic some of the same traits that those individuals have. So having that additional kind of diving into certain biomarkers and looking at certain things from the athlete's perspective was really what kind of brought me to you guys in the first place, because I'm not normal, and I don't want to be looked at as normal when my blood work is getting looked at as well.
Right. That's exactly it. So, we have a very different perspective on blood work than a doctor per se. We're both in the same boat that we want you to be well, we want you to be healthy, but we're just looking for different things. And as you brought up, athletes, we're not average, right? And so that's something we pride ourselves on a lot of times, is we're not average. And so we essentially do have different requirements and different needs, and therefore we should have different testing for that reflects our needs and what reflects ideal for us.
Well, that's fantastic. And as far as yourself, some of the things that probably make you up as a human is what also probably brought you into ABT. So for the viewers, what are some of the things about you that kind of drew you towards ABT?
Yeah, so I'm a sports dietitian, and I'm a physiologist by training. I got my PhD at Cornell in molecular and integrative physiology, and it's a long way to say I'm a science nerd. So I absolutely thrive on physiology research, exercise training, nutrition, that sort of thing, and looking at the biomarkers of it. And so when I came across ABT, if you read kind of their mission statement and my personal mission, they're synonymous. And so I was really excited to find a company that is so genuine and so passionate about their mission and trying to help athletes fuel their best. And that's what I do as a sports dietitian. So it was really fun to kind of see those two amalgamate and come together so we can work, to really help get athletes well and healthy and enjoy sport. We all are in sports for different reasons, and we all have our own level of competitiveness. And that's one of the beautiful things about it. You go to any race and you have the professionals all the way down to, I just want to finish, and everything in between. And so no matter what people's goals are, whether they just want to finish, or if they're going for a certain time or a podium, that's great. That's really admirable. And we just want to help them kind of achieve that goal and get the most out of the sport that they can and enjoy it along the way. I mean, it's not worth it if you're miserable training the whole time just for that one occasion. So really trying to get the most out of your sport and feel good in the process too.
Which makes a heck of a lot of sense why that kind of came together and is working so well for you and them as well. As far as just, we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but just to kind of give a little bit more detail to our viewers of when they go into their doctor compared to when they get a blood test done through Athlete Blood Test, what are some of the intricacies or just difference between the two testing that they're going to go through?
So when we go to the doctor, which hopefully everyone's going to the doctor for an annual physical, they get, checked out. When the athlete gets their blood taken at the doctor's office, the doctor's going to look for deficiencies or for abnormal values, right? And so let's use iron for an example. You go to the doctor and they say, Aaron, you do not have low iron. You don't have anemia. Great, you're normal. And they kind of send you on your way. And that may be true because relative to the general population, your iron levels may be normal. And that means that you have enough iron to function in your daily life, essentially, right? So to go to work, to eat dinner, whatever, that's enough iron. But having enough iron to just kind of get along in normal life relative to the general population is very different than having enough iron to train, to bike, to swim, to run, to compete. That takes additional iron needs on top of that. So it's essentially looking for a deficiency or a low level of nutrient versus what is optimal for performance. Because we might have normal down here, but then you might have ideal for performance over here. And so that's where the data collection really came into play with ABT. Is we collected 10 years worth of data in order to generate, okay, here's where athletes are performing the best. When they have an iron range between this and this, that's the sweet spot. And that could be very different. I'll tell you, it is very different than kind of the general population as we talked about in the beginning. You have people who are sedentary. Maybe they go out for a walk. Maybe they hit the gym for 20 minutes 3 times a week if we're lucky. But it's so different than athletes who are training multiple times a day consistently over weeks. And so really looking at kind of ideal ranges for performance versus just you have enough to be healthy.
So you're saying iron and red blood cell with the distribution of oxygen is important for endurance athletes?
It is. I know, it's a news flash, but.
Well, and especially with that, it locates a lot of parameters that you're going to dive into a lot more in depth as well. And
right.
So it kind of allows for a little bit of, we're, as athletes, abusing our body a little bit differently than the person that's abusing their body by sitting on the couch all day. So you just need to be looked at a little bit differently.
Absolutely, to each their own, but we certainly do have different needs. And for a lot of nutrients, athletes have higher needs than a sedentary person, or even someone just casually exercising every once in a while, because we do have that higher cell turnover. We've got, additional needs to support the training. Because if you look at a 24-hour period, we might do as much in 24 hours as a sedentary person does in a week or two. So we certainly have increased needs from a cellular basis that should be reflected in our dietary components.
That's good piece of information right there. And especially from ABT standpoint, you are able to kind of build out some of the testing parameters that you want to have looked at, what are some of the things that an athlete outside of that iron count could have pulled from their blood to take a look at and be analyzed?
Yeah, so right now we have a couple different panel options, and there's different subcomponents to those panels. So I recommend if someone's never had their blood tested before, with athlete blood test, I would recommend getting a gold panel. In the future, we're going to be redoing how you can purchase different options to be tested, and so depending on when people are watching this, this may or may not have happened, but right now the gold panel is the place to start, and that's really comprehensive, and we break that down into, there's a hydration section, there's micronutrients looking at vitamins and minerals, there's an iron status, there's an overall training tolerance. So we really look at a wide variety of biomarkers, so we can kind of triangulate and look from several different angles to get a good picture of how your training is affecting your biomarkers.
Which again helps in that adapting to the protocols and the training that you're putting down. So that is definitely going to be helpful in that process.
Yeah, and it should be an iterative process. And what I mean by that is ideally you would test at the beginning of the season or during the off season to kind of establish your normal, because maybe you naturally tend to have higher or lower normal levels of something. And so that's good to know, because if we don't have anything to compare it to later on in the season, it might look a little strange. But if we say, oh, well, we know that, at baseline, Aaron, when you're well rested, when you're recovered, this is kind of your normal level, then maybe this doesn't look so obscure, midway through the season. So it's really important to establish kind of your normal, because everyone is different. And that's why there's a range too, is it's not a single number for the biomarkers. It's a range because there definitely is variation between people.
Of course. And so in that, as you said, kind of in the down part of your season or the off season would be a good time to have that. Or if it was your first blood test, it would be a good time, or a good starting point would be that gold package.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a really nice comprehensive. There's a lot of value packed into that. There are, I forget how many biomarkers there are, but it's a lot that's in there. And like I said, it's broken up into different sections throughout the test. So you have, the vitamins, the minerals, you've got, iron biomarkers, you've got, hydration. So there's a lot of things in there. And what I recommend to people is schedule that with your annual physical, just as an annual reminder, depending on when you get your annual physical. But that way, to have a baseline for each year. And then we can also look year to year to see how you're changing as well. But again, trying to establish kind of that overall picture. Here's where you're at in terms of a starting point. And then when you test kind of mid-season or before a race, that gives us something to compare it to, because it's much more valuable over time as you start to test more, because again, we can look at trends and changes to see how the training is affecting your levels. And so once we, train for a while and then retest, that should initially drive our training as a result. We might say, whoa, Aaron, you're really overtrained. Your body's not doing well in responding to the training. Let's maybe back off a little bit. Or, hey, things look really good. I think you could keep pushing it, or bring it up a notch, or whatever. So we can kind of do, one and the other, right? So we want to test to kind of drive our training, but then the test should also reflect how we can change that.
Which is, and from that standpoint, for the viewers, the next step would probably be the bronze would be kind of the follow-up and kind of the training cycle or pre-competition panel that they would want to go for.
Absolutely. So I recommend that athletes get tested 6 weeks before their A race. And if they want to do this several times, if they have a few big races, then that's fine. There's really no downside to that. But the reason we say 6 weeks is because that's enough time for us to make any changes necessary to get you into that sweet spot where we want you to be for optimal performance. So if you test a week before your race and you're low in something, and that's not going to be enough time for us to get your levels up to that ideal range. But if we've got 6 weeks, that's plenty of time for us to get you into that ideal sweet spot. So physiologically, you are primed to do your best. And so, you don't want to test too far out or too close. So 6 weeks is a pretty good spot to test. And you mentioned the bronze panel, and that is not as comprehensive. So that doesn't have as many components to it. It doesn't cost as much, but it's a good check-in point. So that's usually why I say start with the goal to get kind of your overall big picture. And then as you test kind of mid-season or before a race, just do a check-in with the bronze panel.
Which makes, that's very helpful. And especially for individuals that go with the gold first and then look at getting tested throughout the season, this goes for individuals that, like you said earlier, are looking to go onto the podium or just looking to finish, just because, again, with the stress that we're putting on our body as endurance athletes, it's going to affect our numbers. It's going to affect whether it be our hydration, whether it be just all these, our vitamins, minerals, and nutrients are going to be adjusted by that hours and effort that we're putting on a week-to-week basis. So viewers, don't look at it as, well, I got my one done. I'm not looking to get on the podium, so I'm done with that. Here's exactly what Dr. Ańna's talking about, is a view of how it can help you in every aspect for every different athlete, just because we're all putting stress on our body, and we want to know how much stress we're putting on, and is it the right amount of stress? Because no matter what type of athlete, whether you're trying to get on the podium or trying to finish, you still have that opportunity of overtraining. And finding out what your blood is telling you, what's inside your body, is another look for us to be able to say, whoa, back off a little bit, or you know what, we continue to tighten that screw.
Right. And, so few of us are professional athletes. A lot of us have other day jobs, if you will, that we are, have to, recall in terms of functions. And if we are physically, not optimal inside, right? If we're kind of falling apart on the inside, then we're not going to be able to put our best foot forward for other tasks. So if you're an accountant during the day, then, we want you to be your best in terms of, your accounting responsibilities. So, making sure that you have good energy, that you can think clearly, that you're well hydrated. So this really carries over into all aspects of life. And it's not just, well, here's your athletic performance, here's your career performance, here's your family performance. It really is all encompassing. And we want you to be a healthy individual so that you can function well in all areas of life.
And nobody can be upset about that. So another thing that I wanted to touch on, especially with ABT, and another piece that really kind of distances you guys away from a lot of other blood testing groups, is the time and other investments that you're now putting into the female blood test. And those of us that have kind of been inside the physiological arena for a while, it's pretty quick to notice that a lot of the tests throughout the course of history have been on 20 to 25-year-old males because they didn't want to mess up tests. But now you guys are really emphasizing and putting a bigger emphasis on the female body and the changes that females go through when they train. Of course, progesterone, estrogen, all these things are going to jump. But tell us a little bit of what you guys are doing to separate yourself as far as a female going through a blood test with ABT.
Yeah, so it's, as you mentioned, most of the exercise physiology research is done on young men. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But women haven't been highly studied when it comes to exercise physiology. And that's starting to change. We're starting to see more balanced research with women. And so that body of evidence is growing. But when it comes to kind of physiology, training, and nutrition, as you mentioned, the estrogen and progesterone and a few other hormones can really make a big difference and change a lot of parameters when it comes to training and nutrition. So something that we're working on at ABT is a female-specific blood panel. So it's going to include a lot of the gold panel things. So it's going to be very comprehensive, but then it's additionally going to have some of those female hormones. And we're going to then have specific recommendations for that woman based on where she is in her menstrual cycle, and then recommendations for different phases of the menstrual cycle for her. Because as we're starting to understand better that your needs change throughout the menstrual cycle, both in terms of training and nutrition. And it's really about working smarter, not harder. And so how can we leverage our physiology? How can we work with it to use it kind of as an aid instead of really trying to fight against ourselves from a physiological standpoint? And I know for me personally, once I started to understand this in terms of the nutrition and changing my training just a little bit, right? We're not talking about night and day changes here, but just these small modifications can make a big difference in terms of outcome, energy levels, how you feel, your ability to hit wattage. And, as a coach too, it's really helpful to be able to make changes for your athletes, for the men out there who are like, well, this doesn't affect me. But if you, have a wife, a girlfriend, or clients who are female, that it can be really helpful just to make, hey, let's move your FTP test to the next week instead of doing it this week, when I know that your, wattage can be 8 to 10 watts higher during this week because you're going to be in a different phase of your menstrual cycle.
Which is, it's a very, very important thing that, like we had said, it's been overlooked a lot to this point. But as you said, things are starting to ramp up quite a bit, and with the focus that you all are kind of placing on it, really also educates the females that might not be as in tune with this particular information as well, because there are changes that you go through and you might cross them off to certain things, but maybe there's underlying issues that really could be tied to that could have just subtle adjustments and can take you to another level of enjoyment and also competition too.
Right. And like I said, for me personally, it took a while to kind of understand and kind of put the pieces together. But once I did, it really made a big difference in terms of, my physical performance, but then also just my mindset too. It was a little bit easier to kind of be gentle with myself in terms of if I wasn't able to hit my watts, or if I wasn't able to, lift that weight, or if I was just feeling really unmotivated. It's like, oh yeah, like it is that time of the month. And so that makes sense. And it kind of gave some understanding and some clarity to the situation, because I know with some women, it's kind of like, why do I feel like this? What's going on? I was fine yesterday. And, it just kind of helps shed some light and give some explanation to some of our, outputs in terms of physical and mental. So I found it extremely helpful when it comes to understanding those aspects of it. And there's a big educational component to that. And that's something that I'm really going to be working on through ABT, is educating women on how do we change our nutrition throughout the cycle, and how do we change our training? What does this mean? And, unless you've read up on a lot of physiology lately, we don't know this information. And I think that there's a lot to be learned here that can be really helpful. So I'm excited about it. I think there's a lot of positive potential for this.
And I echo that. And like I said, it stood out to me just because it's something that in the movement of development, this is an area that could really have a high ceiling. So it really, your excitement, I can tell, and your passion through the way that you explained it. I think a lot of people are going to benefit from that additional information just because it's something that they can learn. And the more knowledge that we have, the more weapons that we have to go about skinning the cat. So it adds to the process.
I like that. Yes, that's well said.
And another piece that you guys have started to introduce not introduce, but talk about a little bit more, is the genetic testing. And that is another thing. It's something, especially as we are going through the COVID-19 process, some people might be a little bit of afraid of taking themselves, getting a blood test, but there's other things that can be found out from a little bit more of a different type of test. So I wanted to touch a little bit onto the genetic testing and also kind of give a little bit of information of how that differs from the information that you're going to get from a blood test, but also the fact that it's not taking blood, it's just a swab.
Right. I absolutely love this option. And it's something that you can add on as an a la carte option is the genetic test. And I just took one about 2 weeks ago for the first time. I'd never had a genetic test, but as you mentioned, I can't go and get my blood tested right now. The clinics are essentially shut down except for emergency purposes. But I'm kind of sitting here twiddling my thumbs, kind of, it's like a forced off season right now with everything closed. And I'm like, all right, what can I do to better myself later when things do open back up? And so I ordered a genetic test because one, I'd never had one done. Two, I was curious. And three, as you mentioned, no needles. I hate needles. I was thrilled. It literally is just like a swab. It looks like a Q-tip, and you rub it on the inside of your cheeks for 60 seconds and then just pop it in the mail. They give you a prepaid envelope, and it's about 4 to 6 weeks, and then they email you the results. So it's a really great option because, like I said, it's not invasive. You can do it now while we're all quarantined. And it made me feel a little bit better, like, okay, at least I'm gonna do something for myself right now, because I can't be training as much, or I can't be racing, I can't get a blood draw. So this is something that you can sort of take action on now. And the nice thing about the genetic test is that you only have to get it done once, right? Your genetics is essentially your genetics, where with blood testing, the value builds over time, right? So the more kind of tests we have, the better the clarity of the picture is.
Right.
Whereas with genetics, it's like, okay, these are my, this is my genotype, these are my genes. And so that's how I am, that's how I'm built. And now I know this information moving forward for the next 5, 10, 50 years. So it's kind of a one-time investment. And so what I've told my clients recently is take the money that you would have spent on travel for these races and invest it in yourself. Put that towards a genetic test, because then you will have this for the rest of your life. And it's really insightful. So when you order a genetic test, or we call them a genetic analyses now, because I think tests can have a little bit of a intimidating factor to it. It's like, oh no, I have to study for it. Can I fail it? It's more of an analysis. So when you get the genetic test or analysis, what it does is it looks at your genotypes. And so we are predisposed to either be maybe high in something or low in a nutrient, and based on our genotype. And so what this does is this is going to tell us if we're likely to be high or low in something. And then you can use that information going forward to sort of plan your nutrition around that. So I haven't gotten my results back yet, and I'm going to share that with everyone as soon as I do, so everyone can see what the test looks like, what the report looks like, and they can decide if that's something that they're interested in. But what it essentially does is it has all of the vitamins and minerals. Are you likely to be high in this or low in it? And then what I'm going to do is go through and say, all right, it looks like I'm more predisposed to be low in vitamin C. So I'm going to focus on some vitamin C rich foods, maybe throw in another serving or two on a daily basis. So it really kind of helps you customize and personalize your diet. And that's something that I work with clients a lot on too, is they'll bring me their genetic or their blood test and they'll say, hey, can you help me plan my diet around this, because I'm not sure what to do with it. So really kind of helping to guide people moving forward. And these are foods that are going to be really helpful for you, given your genetic profile.
Well, and it can also, in the grand scheme of things, allow you to stop flushing a lot of money down the toilet on certain things. If you're naturally high in certain vitamins and you're still taking an over-the-counter in that vitamin or a multivitamin, you could really be flushing the system with a lot, and then you're just going to send it on down the system.
Absolutely. Yeah, supplements are really expensive. And it's funny because people think that I must be really into the supplements, working with blood test, reports. And, as a dietitian, like, no, I don't want to say I'm anti-supplement, but I think they're highly overused and unnecessary. So I don't recommend that people blindly supplement, because you can really throw your body out of whack on a biochemistry level. So, for example, a study comes out saying that, zinc is good for, I don't know, building muscle. So everyone flocks and gets a zinc supplement and starts popping zinc. But the problem is zinc and copper use the same transporters. So now you've developed a copper deficiency because you've flooded your system with zinc. So my point is, blind supplementation is never a good idea, which is why I don't make supplement recommendations until I see blood work to say, yep, you really do need help in this area. And then using supplements to kind of bring you close to that ideal range, and then using food to kind of cross that finish line. Because we can develop toxicities with supplements, but it's almost impossible to generate a toxicity based on food. So really, like you say, kind of saving some of that money. So people are like, oh, well, it's expensive. But I think, how much are you spending on supplements over the next 40, 50 years if it's completely unnecessary? And sometimes it's downright harmful. So really trying to be smart about where you're allocating your funds.
Which to me makes a heck of a lot of sense. And those that have personal conversations with me probably just heard Dr. Ańna talk about things that I've had a conversation with you about.
I swear he didn't feed me answers.
It's sometimes great minds are alike, right?
That's right.
Well, I think we've kind of touched on a lot of subjects. I don't want to give the people too much information. I think we kind of leave it at this point and allow, if there's additional questions, people can reach out to us. I will try to include I will, of course, have my information in there, but I will try to provide your information to see if anybody does have some follow-up questions or some information that they would like to be addressed about getting a blood test, or the brain just went blank, but the genetic analyses. I want to make sure that they get those questions answered, right?
Yeah, we're happy to answer any questions, and they can reach out to us directly, or through you. We're very receptive. And like I said, we're going to be modifying how people can place orders for certain biomarkers and nutrients, and hopefully in the future it'll be easier so you can be a little more selective about certain nutrients. But I know we've worked really closely with athletes who need certain biomarkers, and maybe the others aren't as necessary. So we're really willing to work with people and work with athletes to get them what they need in order to fuel their best and really what's relevant to them.
Always helpful. Always helpful. And they can find you at athletebloodtest.com.
Yep.
And I think you have 4 current. I know you said that there's going to be a little bit of an adjustment, but right now there's 4 different packages that individuals could find their way. One thing I do want to emphasize is that those of you that have a HSA or an FSA will be able to utilize your cards towards the use or towards a test, correct?
I believe so. You have to double check, but I believe that is true.
I was able to use mine for the test. I would need to find out about the genetic analyses, but for the blood test, I was able to utilize my HSA for that. And it is a qualified medical expense. So that is another avenue that can be taken and allow you to take benefit or take advantage of that benefit, I should say.
Yeah, it's a fun way to use it, more than most.
Absolutely. Well, and again, knowledge is power. We talked about it, and it just allows you to be a better athlete, which we all, whether we're just trying to cross the finish line or trying to get to that podium, we all just want to be a little bit better. And as long as we keep that reaching for better, this is one of those things that can help with that. So it's always positive.
Yeah.
Well, perfect. Well, Dr. Ańna, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to share with me and us and providing us with some really great information. And I look forward to hearing about some of the success that individuals are having because they're having their blood taken.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on the show, Aaron. I appreciate it. And like I said, I'm just excited to be able to share this with other people and hope that they can really get some benefit out of it.
Well, appreciate your passion. And if that passion goes into your analyses, I'll tell you what, everybody's going to be taken well care of.
I was going to say, yes, every analysis is done with serious passion. And that's something too, is everyone on the athlete blood test team, we're all athletes. We all have an athletic background. So everyone is, I would say, just as passionate as I am about it.
Well, that's a good piece of information because athletes like to congregate towards other athletes. So that's a good thing.
We do. We tend to congregate together.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. But again, thank you very much for taking the time. And I look forward to maybe getting you back on here later or sometime in the future.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, likewise. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.